council chambers hummed with nervous energy as representatives from 47 different species gathered for an emergency session. The massive amphitheater on Centaura Prime, which had hosted peaceful deliberations for over 3,000 years, now buzzed with fear and uncertainty. Ambassador Kelvirian of the Altarian Federation called the session to order, his crystalline features reflecting the chamber's soft illumination. As one of the founding members of the Galactic Council, the Altarians had always prided themselves on their diplomatic solutions to interstellar conflicts. Today, diplomacy seemed like a relic of a more innocent time. "We are gathered here," Kelvirian announced, his voice carrying across the chamber through quantum harmonics, to discuss the incident in Sector 847, specifically the encounter between Veltar research vessel Luminous Seeker and the Human Response Fleet. A wave of uneasy chittering, humming, and clicking arose from the assembled delegates. The word human had become a source of considerable anxiety throughout the inner systems over the past several weeks. Captain HFY of the Veltar stood at the central podium, still bearing the psychological scars of her ordeal. The rescue had saved her crew's lives, but it had also shattered every assumption her species held about their place in the galactic hierarchy. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice translator struggling with the emotion in her words, "what I am about to tell you may challenge everything we believe about the nature of intelligence and civilization." She activated a holographic display showing the debris field where her ship had been attacked. The wreckage of hive vessels drifted in the void like broken toys, their organic hulls torn apart with surgical precision. The hive battle group consisted of 28 vessels, including 3 heavy cruisers and multiple fighter squadrons. They had overwhelmed our defenses and boarded our ship. We had prepared for death. The chamber fell silent. Every species represented here had encountered the hive at some point, and none had emerged victorious. The insectoid species was considered an unavoidable hazard of outer rim exploration. The human response consisted of 7 ships. The engagement lasted approximately 43 minutes. When it was over, every single hive vessel had been destroyed, with no human casualties. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the assembly. Delegate Morthex of the Kepler Union, a species known for their military prowess, leaned forward in his biomechanical support chair. "Captain, with respect to your ordeal, that seems improbable. Our own analysis indicates that defeating a hive battle group would require at least a full fleet deployment with acceptable losses." HFY's respiratory slits fluttered in agitation. "I have the complete sensor logs, Delegate Morthex. The humans didn't just defeat the hive, they hunted them. Like predators pursuing prey." She activated another series of recordings, showing the human soldiers moving through her ship. The assembled delegates watched in growing horror as the armored figures systematically eliminated every hive creature with brutal efficiency. "Their weapons are primitive by our standards," HFY continued. "Kinetic projectiles instead of refined energy beams. But they're devastatingly effective. They don't fight like any civilized species. They fight like what, Captain?" prompted Ambassador Kelvirian gently. "Like the environment that created them." Dr. Silith, the Council's chief xenobiologist, rose from her position among the scientific advisors. Her pale, elongated form showed signs of stress, unusual for her typically composed species. "Honored delegates, I have been reviewing the classification files for the human homeworld. What we have discovered is unprecedented." The holographic display changed to show Earth in all its violent glory. Storms ravaged the surface while volcanic activity painted entire continents in fire. The atmospheric composition alone was enough to kill most known species within minutes. Class Death World designation appears to have been conservative. By our current understanding, this planet should be completely sterile. The combination of atmospheric toxicity, gravitational stress, cosmic radiation, and geological instability creates an environment that defies rational explanation for complex life development. Delegate Threngar of the Pacifica Collective, a species that had achieved spaceflight through peaceful cooperation and shared resources, spoke up with obvious distress. "Doctor, are you suggesting that these humans evolved in an environment that was actively trying to eliminate them?" "Not just trying, Delegate. succeeding with every other species that ever existed there. According to their own historical records, over 99% of all life forms that ever evolved on their world are now extinct. The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations. The concept of such massive extinction events was nearly incomprehensible to species that had evolved on stable, hospitable worlds. The implications are staggering, Dr. Sileth continued. Every human alive today is descended from organisms that survived constant, overwhelming pressure from their environment. They haven't just adapted to violence, they've been shaped by it at the most fundamental genetic level. Admiral Korstek of the Rigel Defense Force, one of the few military commanders present, cleared his throat with a sound like grinding metal. What does this mean for our current security arrangements? The hive has been contained through our naval patrols and early warning systems. If humans can eliminate them so easily, Admiral, interrupted Ambassador Zexhai, you misunderstand. The humans didn't just eliminate the hive forces, they enjoyed it. The silence that followed was deafening. The concept of deriving pleasure from violence was so alien to most council species that their translators struggled to convey the meaning. I watched their soldiers hunt the creatures through my ship, she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. They moved with a predatory grace that reminded me of the apex carnivores from our homeworld's ancient history. But these weren't mindless animals. They were intelligent, coordinated, and absolutely merciless. Delegate Vorthal of the Epsilon colonies raised a tentacle in question. Captain, did they make any demands? Requests for territory or resources? None. When I asked Commander Chen what they wanted in return for the rescue, she seemed confused by the question. She said they were just doing their job. What job? Pressed Vorthal. Patrol duty. Apparently they conduct regular sweeps of the Outer Rim territories as a matter of routine. The implications hit the assembly like a physical blow. Humans weren't expanding into galactic space as conquerors or colonists. They were already there, treating the most dangerous regions of the galaxy as their personal territory. Ambassador Kelvirian called for order as panic began to spread through the chamber. Delegates, please. We must approach this situation rationally. Rationally? Delegate Threngar's voice reached a pitch that caused several species translators to emit warning tones. You want us to be rational about a species that treats warfare as a recreational activity? Dr. Sileth accessed another file, her expression grim. Honored delegates, there's more. I've been analyzing human cultural transmissions, trying to understand their social structure. What I've found is disturbing. The display showed various human entertainment media, movies, games, literature, all depicting violence, conflict, and warfare as central themes. They don't just accept violence as necessary for survival. They've mythologized it, created entire art forms around it. Their heroes aren't scholars or diplomats, they're warriors and soldiers. But surely, interjected Ambassador Felnoth of the Academic Coalition, their advancement to spacefaring status would have required them to develop beyond such primitive impulses? On the contrary, delegate. They've simply found new applications for those impulses. Their space program wasn't developed for exploration or scientific advancement. It was created as a weapons delivery system during one of their global conflicts. The chamber erupted again, this time with genuine terror. The idea of a species reaching the stars through military applications, rather than peaceful exploration, was horrifying to beings who had achieved spaceflight through cooperative scientific advancement. They have over 300 different words for forms of violent conflict, Dr. Sileth continued relentlessly. War, battle, skirmish, massacre, slaughter. Their language is rich with terminology for activities that most of our species don't even have concepts for. Admiral Korstek leaned forward, his massive bulk causing his chair to groan. Doctor, what are their numbers? How many humans are currently active in our region of space? Unknown, Admiral. They seem to operate in small, independent groups across a vast area. Current estimates suggest anywhere from several thousand to several million individuals spread across the Outer Rim territories. Several million? The Admiral's voice carried a note of disbelief. How is that possible? The logistics alone. Admiral, Captain Zexhai interrupted. During my rescue, I observed their equipment and vehicles. Everything was designed for maximum efficiency and minimal resource consumption. They don't require the elaborate support structures that our species depend on. They're entirely self-sufficient. Delegate Morthex shifted uncomfortably in his chair. What does this mean for our expansion plans? The Outer Rim territories contain vital resources for our continued growth. Delegate, Dr. Silith replied carefully. Based on current evidence, I would strongly advise against any expansion into human-occupied space. We quite literally cannot comprehend the level of risk involved. Are you suggesting they would attack us? I'm suggesting they might not even view it as an attack. To a species that has spent millions of years fighting for survival against every conceivable threat, eliminating potential competitors might be as natural as breathing. 8. The chamber fell into a troubled silence as the full implications began to sink in. For millennia, the Galactic Council had operated under the assumption that intelligence naturally led to cooperation and peaceful coexistence. They had built their entire civilization around this principle. The existence of humans shattered that fundamental belief. Ambassador Kelvirian finally spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of decision. What do you recommend, Doctor? Complete avoidance of human-occupied territories, establishment of clear boundaries, and strict, non-interference protocols. And most importantly, we must never, under any circumstances, be perceived as a threat by their species. You're suggesting we surrender entire sectors of space to accommodate them. Ambassador, I'm suggesting we acknowledge reality. Humans don't need our permission to occupy those territories. They're already there, and they've demonstrated capabilities that far exceed our ability to contest. Delegate Vorthal raised another tentacle. What about diplomatic contact? Surely rational beings can reach an accommodation. Captain Zexhai laughed, a sound that carried no humor. Delegate, I tried to thank them for saving our lives. Do you know what Commander Chen told me? The chamber waited. She said they were just doing their job. To them, annihilating an entire battle group of hive creatures that had terrorized this region for centuries was routine patrol duty. They don't think like us. They don't value what we value. They're operating on principles we can't even comprehend. Ambassador Kelvirian rose slowly, his crystalline form catching the light as he prepared to address the assembly. Delegates, it appears we are faced with a new reality. For the first time in our recorded history, we have encountered a species that achieved intelligence without abandoning their predatory nature. The question before us now is not how to deal with humans, but how to ensure our own species' survival in a galaxy where such beings exist. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. The Galactic Council would establish new protocols immediately. All exploration and expansion activities would be suspended in the Outer Rim territories, new classification systems would be developed for apex predator species, and most importantly, a permanent buffer zone would be maintained between Council space and human-occupied regions. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, their conversations were hushed and anxious. The galaxy had changed overnight, and not in ways any of them were prepared for. Ambassador Kelvirian remained behind, staring at the holographic display still showing Earth's violent surface. For 3,000 years, the Council had believed themselves to be the pinnacle of galactic civilization. They had been wrong. Somewhere in the darkness between the stars, apex predators were hunting, and the prey had finally realized they were no longer alone.